AI is growing at a super fast pace. We're going from LLMs to agentic AI to physical AI. That's the holy grail of AI. Autonomous driving is part of that with camera, with computer vision AI, and we're automating that. So we don't need any more human in the loop.
How much time do you think it would take for autonomous vehicles to become more mainstream?
I don't think the bottleneck is tech. Tesla has enough data. They can turn it on tomorrow if they want. For it to be better than a human being, I don't think more than 1 or 2 years.
What's the future hold for NATIX?
Building the largest camera infrastructure in the world without owning a single camera. That's the vision for NATIX. That's the future for NATIX. And we won't sleep until we have built the most advanced systems that you can see out there.
Welcome to We Are DePIN, a podcast focused on the world of DePIN projects. Each episode, we invite projects to discuss how they are revolutionizing the world of DePIN and Web3. Our goal is to keep you informed about everything happening in the DePIN space through insightful discussions. This podcast is brought to you by Minima, the embedded blockchain. Minima is a fully decentralized layer 1 blockchain that can embed and run a full node on edge devices. Minima is not just another blockchain. It's a fundamental shift in how decentralized networks can operate. Its lightweight architecture allows it to run a full node on chip on any mobile or IoT device, making it exceptionally adaptable to scaling any decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Minima's technology is now being supported by an expansive and engaged community of over 50,000 node operators. So join us for this next insightful discussion and enjoy the episode.
Alireza, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Sina, for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
It's my absolute pleasure. I think this is maybe our longest in terms of, I first met you in Dubai about over a year ago now, which is crazy. And it was during the floods. If anyone was at Token 2049 in Dubai, a couple of, not the one that just happened, but the one before that. We had our first We Are DePIN event there, and you came. That's I guess where we met. So very, very good to finally have you on the podcast to talk about NATIX. I would love to start off by basically asking where the idea for NATIX came from, and how did you sort of stumble across the problem that you guys are solving?
Yeah, so we started actually the company in 2020. 3 co-founders. We always wanted to do something at the intersection of AI, IoT, and blockchain because we really believed in these 3 technologies. Funnily, we were quite familiar with DePIN even in 2020, even before that. But when we started the company, we started it as a Web2 because the first check that we got was from Plug and Play Ventures from Silicon Valley, and we wanted to do a very crazy ICOE big idea, and then we kind of niched that down and removed the crypto element. Anyway, we ended up building AI stack that can run on edge, so devices with minimal computational power, closer to the source of data, targeting mainly CCTV cameras and smart city applications, parking monitoring, crowd monitoring. We created few products, revenue, and then 2 years down the road, this is 2022, we realized there's a bigger problem and a bigger market here at the end of the day. We realized that AI is growing at a super fast pace, and one of the most valuable data types for AI is visual data. It's one of the richest datas. And camera, from sensor point of view, is, I call it king of sensors. It's amazing because it's very cheap, it's very affordable, yet it produces a very rich level of data, and you can do a lot with it. So we were betting on AI growing and us building the infrastructure for that growth. And we already saw, because we come from autonomous driving background as well, and we saw that, Tesla is betting on cameras for something as sensitive as autonomous driving, where there was this wedge in the market where some players were betting very heavily on LiDAR, right? I mean, now the Tesla's bet is coming to show who is winning. But back in the time, there was a huge wedge, and mostly actually people were betting on LiDAR and basically Waymo's direction. So very soon we came to the vision to build the largest camera infrastructure in the world without owning a single camera, crowdsourcing it the same way that Uber has built the largest taxi network without owning a single taxi, or Airbnb has built the largest housing network essentially without owning a single unit. to crowdsource the infrastructure. And then we realized that the model that works very well for this is crypto incentivization. So Helium was there, Filecoin was there, Akash was already there. I think Helium was the closest to us because it was still like physical infrastructure, physical infrastructure. And we saw that when you reward your users with your native cryptocurrency, you can bootstrap it much faster than rewarding fiat or not rewarding at all, right? For example, Google Map is not rewarding anything. They're just providing utility. So we saw this new model and we were like, okay, jackpot, it's a perfect match. And we were quite familiar with DePIN. Yeah, that was kind of the trigger for building NATIX Network. And to date, this is still our vision. Well, a little bit of the caveat here is that we're focusing on on-street mobile camera infrastructure. So we're not focusing on CCTVs. We're not focusing on drone cameras. So in short to midterm, we want to dominate the mobile on-street camera infrastructure, which can cater the data that map makers need and autonomous driving companies need. We can dig a little bit deeper into that, but that is today our focus.
That was my next question. Is you talked a lot about, visual data being the most rich and the most beneficial. Basic question: why? Like, why? What is the quality that unlock? Like, what does it unlock? I guess in terms of autonomous driving, or like for what and for what industries? I guess.
I mean, it's about environmental perception, right? Also, in the human beings, you have all these different kind of senses, right? Funnily, I think as a human, you can relate that when you close your eyes, you can free a lot of capacity, or if you look at it on the negative side, you will cripple yourself a lot from being able to interact and navigate in that environment, right? By the way, I don't know if you're into meditation, but that's why in meditation they ask you to shut your eyes, because you will free a lot of the capacity from the brain to focus on something else. Because brain is processing from all the sensory information that it's getting. I think around 90%, if I'm not wrong, around that number is associated with processing visual data from your eyes, right? So people realize this very early on, that visual data is extremely powerful, or optical data, for environmental perception, more powerful than radar, more powerful than other kind of sensory radio frequency, for example. And that's why camera in general, optical sensors have been very, very powerful, but camera is just the cheap, affordable sensor that can do a lot if computer vision AI can get as good as a brain, essentially, in terms of depth understanding, in terms of object detection, in terms of navigation, using visual information. So yeah, that's why it's not just us. I mean, if you look, the industry has been betting on. I mean, one of the frontiers of AI. I mean, we just saw the breakthrough was in LLMs and so on. Right now, for me and you, let's say, as a non-native AI engineer, but from 2013, 2010. People started to work on computer vision AI as one of the, let's say, most focused umbrellas of these kind of deep learning, machine learning models for different applications, predominantly in map making, autonomous driving, for perception of the car and so on.
And I guess like a following question. So you're collecting all this data. What happens after that? So what's the sort of steps, and also for what industries, and for what is this useful for?
Yeah, so to also just recap for the viewers that don't know what we are collecting exactly. So we have two products. The first one we ship to the market is a smartphone app. You just download the app on your phone. You put the phone on the dashboard of your car. You drive around. We collect what we call map attributes: traffic signs, traffic lights, lane markings. And this is used for map makers. And maps are essential parts of our life. I mean, people know maps from Google Maps, but what people don't know is that any piece of package that you get delivered to you by Amazon or these last mile delivery companies that deliver you your food and groceries, this is all relying on very good maps that can take you from point A to B. And even saving a couple of seconds from each delivery means millions of dollars of saving at the macro level of one of these businesses, right? Or tens of millions actually of dollars of savings. So that's the number one product. Number two product that we launched recently, actually May this year, we went live with it, is a little box for Tesla vehicles. You can plug it into the glove box of your Tesla, and it captures your entire driving through the lens of 6 surrounding cameras of your Tesla. It also captures other metadata with this video data that it's capturing, GPS, IMU, and so on and so forth. And we use the front camera of the Tesla for map making. So we run a computer vision AI model on it, and we detect traffic signs, traffic lights, fire hydrants, other types of infrastructure, light poles, and so on. And we use the entire multi-camera, let's say, file that we have or data that we have for autonomous driving. Actually, the autonomous driving companies buy this data from us either for training purposes or for testing and validation purposes, right? I think autonomous driving is a very hot topic right now. Not just autonomous driving, robotics is even hotter these days, because autonomous driving has been there for quite some years right now, or at least the companies that have shown some working prototypes, to say the least. But the umbrella term for these are physical AI. I'm sure might have heard of NVIDIA CEO Jensen saying that we're going from LLMs to agentic AI to physical AI. That's the holy grail of AI. Yeah, autonomous driving is part of that. And two problems that pretty much all physical AI companies are facing at the moment: compute. They need a ton of compute for training. And NVIDIA is on the cap table of most of the prominent ones. That's how they're solving the compute issue. I think decentralized compute projects are going to hate me, but I don't think they're going to be at this structure solving that pain point, because robotics company, let's say Tesla, for example, or Boston Dynamics, they're not going to trust their IP, their code, their model with their weights to run on my basement GPU, let's say, that I have set for myself. So they really want like trusted infrastructure to run this on. Second biggest pain point that they have next to compute is real world data. You need a ton of real world data. And believe me when I say robotics is even far more behind autonomous driving, but autonomous driving is also really, really suffering from this. Just to put it into perspective for you, the largest open source multi-camera data set for autonomous driving is only 5,000 hours. It was collected only in Germany. It took them 3 years to collect the 5,000 hours, very localized to Germany. They were equipping some driving school cars with cameras and collecting that data. We launched our Tesla hardware May 2nd, and in a span of 3 months right now, we have over 45,000 hours of driving data. We got 5,000 hours in the first 3 to 4 weeks, if I'm not wrong, right? So you can imagine what level of different basically level of scale we're talking about when we're crowdsourcing with this model versus, if we had to use different approaches to do this. Of course, we're also thinking of open sourcing part of this data for academic research, and we're working with some top-notch researchers in autonomous driving. But I think very soon we are going to even publish open source, the largest multi-camera data set that is out there.
I think it's an incredible idea, and you're completely right. Like if you assume that AI will develop into, well, firstly, AI will continue developing at an exponential rate. One of the big innovations that will come out of it is autonomous vehicles. They need good quality data for that to happen. For something like you, it makes a ton of sense. I think if I'm not wrong, the data is a huge bottleneck for why autonomous vehicles aren't as abundant. They're very localized to certain areas. As soon as you have autonomous vehicles, and I would love to sort of dig into this rabbit hole in a bit, but as soon as you have autonomous vehicles, I think things will escalate so much quicker because you have cheaper rides, you have cheaper insurance, you have safer roads. There's a lot of things that come out of it. We'll talk about it in a second, but because there's one question I really want to ask you. It's gone from, physical maps to Google Maps to then Waze, and Waze was obviously bought out by Google as well, Israeli company. Why, I guess, like, for you guys, do you see yourselves as the next generation of, I guess, mapping? Because Waze is somewhat similar, I guess, like a bit before, because they relied on other drivers mapping what's on the roads. You're going a completely step further.
Yeah, so I would say Waze on steroids because um, the way that Waze collected or crowdsourced data was, and it's pretty good by the way, is it relied on human intelligence to see something. So the camera was your eye as a driver, the brain, the AI was the brain, and you had to have this physical interaction with the app. Click that I saw a police here, right? And if you get that information multiple times from multiple users, you can verify or verify against it essentially that, okay, let's say the police car is not there anymore, right? Uh, we're putting that on steroid with camera, with computer vision AI, and we're automating that. So we don't need any more human in the loop. And I think that's a huge advancement. And we're capturing far more information than what Waze is grabbing. I mean, you can't count the light posts. You can't detect traffic lights. You can't detect if there's a traffic sign goes missing or there's a new speed limit, that is added, which is conditional on a rain, let's say, pouring, right? These are very complex traffic information that you can understand with AI. You can also understand as a human, but it's very difficult to ask manual reporting of these things. So yeah, it's based on steroid. Now, Waze's catch was, okay, for me to push you to report and contribute, you have to get something out of this, right? So what I'm giving you is a utility. Use my navigation app. I'm going to give you the best navigation app, and you're going to really love the experience, and you're going to give back, right? In a form of a community, right? And by the way, this reminds me of early tribes where, I give you something, you give me something, right? With the introduction of money, the entire value chain became far more efficient, right? I give you something, you give me that reference unit of money, and when I want to get something from you, let's rediscuss that based on that reference unit of money that we have, right? So I think like basically the DePIN model is that on steroid as well. So we don't have to give. We are, by the way, giving utility to our drivers as well, like navigation, like dashcam functionality. But many of the DePINs I see, they're not doing this because you're rewarding your user. You're giving them a piece of your economy, and that's why it's far more attractive. That's why our model is faster than Waze even or other products, because it is in a way a gambling, right? You're getting token for this, and the token might be something, might not, unless you liquidate it today, or even pre-launch projects that they give token. But it's a far more attractive value proposition, because when Waze got sold to Google for a couple of $billion, the early contributors to Waze, they at best they might have had a couple of T-shirts from these guys, right? Didn't get anything out of it. When Uber did an IPO, the early drivers didn't get anything out of it, although they were a big contributing factor to Uber becoming Uber, right? So we are saying that we give you a piece of this economy, and if we go successful, you go successful. I mean, it sounds like a better deal, but it shows that people are far more susceptible to this way of economical value distribution.
Yeah, and that's the sort of drive to earn model that you talked about, right? So like that would be included, because with Waze specifically, they, when you report certain things, they give you it's like a points system. It's not fungible. So with something like a drive to earn model, you're far more incentivized to, and again, you're not having to manually report things like you do on Waze. With a camera like yourselves, you're just driving as normal, but you're still earning by just having, the infrastructure with the Tesla or with the app, as you said. So yeah, I think the barrier to, reporting data is it's far lower. So yeah, I can definitely agree with you. Like Waze on steroids for sure. That's a good way of describing it. I want to go down the autonomous vehicle rabbit hole, Alireza, because I know that's your background as well, as you said. Let's talk about it. So how does something like this unlock autonomous vehicles in the future? What does a world look like with autonomous vehicles? And does the autonomous vehicle as well report its own data? In which case, is it an exponential curve?
Yes, it does. It's just that it reports to whom. Tesla is a very living example of the fact that, the more cars you have in the market, the more data, therefore the better. And by the way, they did something quite insane, which is taking AI engineers and human out of the loop. So literally, the more data they collect, the better the system gets, hands off. I mean, this is one of the most advanced systems that you can see out there. And that's why they beat Waymo with all of these sensor setup. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the pricing of these two vehicles, but a Tesla robotaxi or a normal car that they just deploy the software on, it costs, $40,000 to $60,000 versus a Waymo vehicle is $200,000. It's very, very different cost structure because a lidar is expensive, and these guys have 16 cameras or 12 cameras. I don't know. So of course, Tesla is a crowdsourcing model without crypto incentive, with a lot of utility, I would say. That's the utility game. And how we are helping, I mean, this kind of real world data is helping, as I said, the training or testing and validation. So let's go one by one. When it comes to training, you train this AI model like a child to learn from the traffic behavior, how different traffic participants are behaving, and it's learning what to do, right? So I guess that part is quite simple. If you show this little child a lot of the real world, gradually would learn. If you show this child a lot of edge cases, what we call edge cases in the autonomous driving industry, which means sudden harsh brakings, if there's animal on the curbside of the road, if there's jaywalking, all these kind of interesting situations. Every time you show this to the AI, it learns what to do, how to do it, and so on, right? Problem happens with the training is that we have exhausted the amount of real world data that we can collect. And this is the case, by the way, with any, even the best crowdsourced models. It's not easy to collect ton of data and to generate all of these edge cases. The more edge cases you have, the better the car. Sometimes you don't even know what an edge case would look like. You will know it after. It's the unknown, right? And after it has happened, and maybe an accident has happened, then you can learn from this and so on, right? So this is like the feedback loop that you have. So that's why most of the industry has been going towards synthetic data. Basically, let the AI generate, hallucinate a version of this world, like you see with these Gen AI, like VO3 right now making videos. Let the AI generate. But for the AI to generate this far more efficiently, and the cost for the AI to generate this is far lower than you going and collecting this, even crowdsourcing this, by the way. It's like we're talking like, a factor of 100x cheaper. So if you have your own collection vehicles to go collect real world data, that's going to be very expensive. Then we can do another, what Google does, like Waymo used to collect their own data, and a lot of automotive OEMs, they have their own data collection vehicles, sensors rig. They have drivers, and then they go drive it around, and they do some in Japan, UK, Germany, basically where they want to deploy the end product, because they need data from all these different kind of road types with their traffic participant behaviors that are there. For example, in Netherlands, in Amsterdam, the bicycle is insane. I mean, if you drove there, you will know what I mean, right? So you need data from there to train your vehicle for Netherlands if you're launching your vehicle in Netherlands, in Amsterdam. Very, very expensive. So already us crowdsourcing that is a factor of 10 to 100x cheaper. And by generating this kind of data with AI, so Gen AI, that's another 10 to 100x cheaper, right? But for generative AI to be able to generate very realistic video data with all of these edge cases and so on, you need a lot of real world data to train that AI. The more data you give to that AI, good quality data, multi-camera data, the better your Gen AI model gets to hallucinate a version of this world. And once you have that, that's the holy grail that the industry is working on right now. Even Elon said we have exhausted all of our real world data. That's why the world is going towards synthetic data. You can very, very efficiently train. Now, once you have trained, either with real world data or synthetic data, doesn't matter. You come into a next stage of basically your product development, which is testing and validation. Very important. Same thing with the robots, by the way, as well. So there, now you have to test. So I've trained with a bunch of data. Now I have to test and validate if this car will behave in all these kind of situations. It will actually, and we're not talking like simple validation, right? Old times it used to be that, okay, a lane change, for example, very simple tasks, right? Right now, we're talking very complex situations like these edge cases that I described, and if the call will perform or not, right? So this is also where you need a lot of real world data. For you to really understand if a car will perform well when a harsh braking situation happens, you need to have a harsh braking situation actually inside simulation environment to test your vehicle, right? And where do you get that? So you can get that from real world data. So if we have a footage, a clip of a harsh braking, we can somehow feed that into simulation environment and test this vehicle in a harsh braking environment. Because again, building a harsh braking manually by humans, like a game designer, very expensive. This used to be what they used to do like a few years ago, but too expensive. But if you have the clip of the harsh braking, you can translate that into simulation environment and test it. Partially, you can also use synthetic data, but you can never get the real world data out of this loop. Because if you use synthetic data for training and you also use it for simulation, testing, and validation, there's a very high chance that your AI will drift or hallucinate. That's kind of the technical term for it, right? So that's what we're doing essentially in the autonomous driving, and if you see a robotics company collecting robotics data, for example, it's exactly the same pipeline that I described for you, right? It's called real world to simulation, simulation to real world, real to sim to real kind of pipeline. That it's a kind of a common thing for any physical AI development company to go through.
It's really, really interesting. And I've read about synthetic data a lot and how we run out of real world data. With something like you guys, it again makes a lot of sense because it exponentially increases the amount of real world data that you can collect, because the more cars on the road, the more data that you can collect. And the quality of the synthetic data that you can produce off the back of that will be higher quality, right? So will this just exponentially increase the rate of innovation within autonomous vehicles?
So once we have really, really good synthetic models, we can speed this up much, much faster. Because if you think about it, I mean, all of this that I explained, this is something that I'm foreseeing in the next few years to become standardized, right? People are working at an R&D level on these things, right? But just to give you an example, if for the synthetic scenario generation, so you want to test your vehicle in a harsh braking situation, there are companies, simulation companies, they have people that are scenario designers. They sit behind the desk like a game designer, building a harsh brake situation with the trees, with the buildings around it, right? You want to have as real of an environment for the perception system as possible. And this was taking days to weeks, depending on the complexity of one scenario. And when you're testing, we're talking, hundreds to thousands of scenarios. You want to test one model that you have developed. You want to test it in many of these scenarios, right? So you can imagine how much of a human intensive work this was, right? Or for training, they had to build these vehicles, $200,000 to $500,000, send them around the cities and collect data. And if I want to deploy my Waymo vehicle in Germany, then I also need to send my data collection vehicle to Germany and collect data. Same for Japan, same for UK. So very, very expensive, very also time consuming until you get all of these, permissions and you ship your vehicle and you start collecting data and you get it back and your engineers can get their hands dirty. And then if something goes wrong, so you've developed your AI, now you're testing and validating, now something is wrong. You realize where the weak points are, right? You want to go back into retraining, right? With new data. So again, going and then trying to, collect that real world data. So you can imagine a process that used to take probably 6 months to 1 year, people can do in weeks, if not in days, actually, with taking human out of the loop. So yeah, I mean, it's scary, but these kind of things compound at the end of the day. That's why I think the pace that we saw robotics and autonomous driving in the past years, you have to multifold that, and that's the pace that you're going to see. Same thing with LLMs, right? Because synthetic data was not good enough 3 years ago. We tested in our company 4 years ago with synthetic data. I'll tell you what was the use case. We wanted to train an AI model to just detect pothole. Very simple. Detect pothole. It's very difficult to get pothole data because we didn't have access to that. There are not many open databases. So we tried to do it synthetically, and it was horrible. I mean, right now, if you go to NVIDIA's NVIDIA Cosmo, insane. I mean, go check it out. It's open source. Anybody can use it, and the quality is just crazy, right? So also by the fact that it's open source, that means a lot of these companies and engineers will have access to that as the base, right? So whatever you build, you have access to that, and that compounds very, very quickly.
I want to ask you a question because I feel like the general public feel like the autonomous vehicles mainstream is many, many years away, like probably decades. I have a feeling it's far closer than people think because of the exponentiality of AI and all the stuff that you just mentioned. Data collection plus AI is generally getting better with interpretation, deciphering. Add on top of that the quality of the synthetic data they can produce. All of these things. How many years do you think it would take, or like how much time do you think it would take for autonomous vehicles to become more mainstream?
I don't think the bottleneck is tech. I think the bottleneck is regulation. And then this is what I have seen. I think you also live in Europe, so you realize that the only reason that right now you can't do FSD with Tesla in Europe, right? Why? Tesla has enough data, they can turn it on tomorrow if they want. It's just the regulators haven't allowed it because they're so slow and they need a lot more, tests to be done. And I just think they're very, very slow versus US. And I think that's the attitude of US and China to a great extent. Let's put it out in the market and we will deal with the consequences later. So this is great for innovation, right? It might not be good for certain things, but as an entrepreneur, this is where I want to develop because I can get the fastest feedback loop possible, right? That's what Tesla has been doing. That's what a lot of these Chinese OEMs have been doing as well. That's why they're so good at it, right? Europe is much slower. So to answer your question, if it's asked over China and US, I would say we already have it. I mean, but what do we need, right? FSD is already there. If you're sat in their cars, you realize it. For it to be better than a human being, I don't think more than 1 or 2 years, if you ask me, for these locations. And it was already better than, and the way that I measure it by being better than human beings is not when there is some sort of a mistake happening at some point, right? I mean, again, you have to look at the numbers. If you find an edge case, a rare case, that the car couldn't perform very well or was confused or whatever, but you have to look at the total number of drives that were done by that car or by that fleet, and you have to look at how many of these situations did it generate. And I can already promise you that if you look at the numbers in 1 or 2 years, it would be far lower than the fatalities and accidents and all the kind of thing that happens with human in the loop. That's guaranteed. I mean, people are scared of cars, autonomous cars taking over, but it's actually safer. It's safer for everybody. I had this deep conversation with someone with robots coming up, and we had a chat. Funny conversation. So if there's a humanoid, and let me ask you this, Sina, if there's a humanoid out in 5 years and you have children, kids, would you want a humanoid to be the nanny for your kid, or would you actually insist on having a human nanny for your kid to help you, or a babysitter, right? what would your answer be?
I prefer a human.
Okay, so this person gave me a very interesting insight because I answered like you, and he said, no, actually, I prefer a humanoid because it can't get emotional for nothing. Because many of the, basically babysitters or nannies, maybe they are having a bad day. They can get emotional. Things can affect them. Emotional status can affect them, right? So that's number one. Number two is that the education that this humanoid can give your kids is definitely far better than any nanny. I mean, if GPT-5 is right now a PhD student, you can't have a PhD student as your nanny. Even if you have, I would argue he's so narrowed in his own field, he can't do any other one,
And he
right?
can't explain it
So
in a way that like a
he can't
5-year-old would understand.
explain.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's actually safer. You're 100% sure that it's a machine and it will deliver based on the program that it has, and it would never fail, and it would provide the education and the care for those many hours that you need it for. And I actually, you know, rethought about this, to be honest with you. I don't want to tell you that I'm on either side, but it's a philosophical deep thing that when we have trust over the technology, this whole thing can actually change. If you have trust over technology, which you don't have, I think that's why your answer was, I want a human. Maybe I think you and me, and I had the same answer. We don't yet trust it, but I'm sure if somebody puts the facts, for you and
I'm
says,
definitely open-minded. Like with autonomous vehicles, going back to that, I was in the same boat as probably the general public, saying I wouldn't want to be in a car that doesn't have a human behind it. It feels very unsafe. But after I think the friction points will start to decrease. On it, honestly, I think they'll start to decrease very quickly, and the people that drive will only be the people that drive for enjoyment. For the people that just drive to get from A to B, they'll just use autonomous vehicles, and it opens up new business models as well. That's the other thing. It opens up business models of you can make money with your car when you sleep, and overall the sort of the cost of having a car will be decreased, and also on the other side, you know, a business model like Uber, but I think it'll be probably in the more sort of deep in space. It'll be far cheaper than what Uber is right now, for instance, because they don't have a human component to it. And in which case, people won't have to own cars anymore because it'll be so cheap. So on both sides, it relieves a lot of pressure. It's something that I've thought about very deeply, and it's something that I feel like I probably agree with you. I think in the next few years, it will be something that's fairly mainstream.
I
Yeah.
see the same way.
Okay, good. Agreement. Alireza, I want to wrap up the podcast. We've been going for a while. There's so many other things I want to talk about. There's one really question I want to talk about before we start sort of wrapping up, and that's around sort of data and privacy. One thing that you guys, I guess, you're collecting so much data, and as the vehicle span increases, and it will, and as obviously the AIs increase, are getting better, you're going to be collecting data that perhaps people don't want you to collect. So people on the street and different things like that. And you're essentially having the most sophisticated camera network in the world. There's nothing that really comes close to it, in my opinion. And so, what are the ramifications that come from that people are worried about? And that's with privacy and security. So, what are your sort of comments with that?
Well, we anonymize, so at the point that the user is giving us their data, if it's imagery, if it's visual data, we run a computer vision model on those imageries, and we essentially blur or black out the faces and the number plates, which is associating an identity to that object, essentially, to that human or to that vehicle. So that is a given for us. As a matter of fact, all of our customers need the data to be anonymized. We cannot not anonymize. Nobody will even touch your data because of GDPR, because of the data privacy rules in the US. So believe me when I say it, corporates will not touch your data if you do not anonymize at the end of the day. So it's very, very important. And I see more and more, and that's what we did with DriveEnd, right? DriveEnd, at the current stage of it, it doesn't collect any visual data. We trained an AI model, shipped it to the smartphone. It runs on the AI chip of your smartphone. It's looking at the images that it generated by the lens of your camera every millisecond. And It's basically extracting the information that the AI is trained to extract or detect, right? Potholes, traffic signs, traffic lights, and all this kind of information. This is what I call edge compute, and it's also the holy grail of preserving privacy because there is no visual data even leaving this network, right? But yeah, I think I'm not a maxi. I think like data anonymization and privacy is very, very important. But that's why there's a framework for it. You need to comply with that. We are very good at that because we are a German company and we have been trying to sell 2020 and 2021 to German cities our technology. And these guys grill the hell out of you. I mean, if somebody has sold to a German city a camera-based solution, I can assure you that they have some of the toppest, data anonymization protocols and infrastructures, because otherwise they can't essentially. So they do a very, thorough assessment on how you're collecting PII and anonymizing PII, personal identifier information. That's what I mean by PII. So yeah, I think. But at the end of the day, also to say that I really believe that we need to have our network as decentralized as possible, because giving this much power to a centralized entity as a camera infrastructure, it's dangerous, it's potent. Nobody wants that we don't want that responsibility as well, right? So at the end of the day, I think it's very, very important to decentralize it. That's how we saw it as a vision, and that's definitely where we want to be heading towards.
Yeah, you talked about obviously corporates. There's a different rabbit hole you can go down when you talk about, say, governments. We won't talk about it on this episode. You could talk about it for ages with that. The UK has recently, done the online, what was it, the Online Security Act or something like this, Online Privacy Act. One of the pretty negative things for liberty, in my opinion, and it's one of these things that perhaps with autonomous vehicles and data collection, that could be something that the governments want in terms of under the guise of, reducing crime or something like this. So different thing to talk about entirely. But Alireza, I want to ask you one final question before wrapping up. And I guess what's the future hold for NATIX?
Building the largest camera infrastructure in the world without owning a single camera. That's the vision for NATIX. That's the future for NATIX, and we won't sleep until we have built that. And I think it's extremely powerful because we've been betting on AI for many years, and I'm still betting on AI. It's compounding faster and faster, and I think really it used to be that they said data is the new gold, data is the oil. I think we're getting closer to that. Data is becoming all of those things, and good data, good quality data, purposeful data. And yeah, so it's gonna be the game of infrastructure at the end of the day, in my opinion. And I think we want to be a player, one of the top players when it comes to visual data. So yeah, but this is of course the vision, but in short to midterm, we're closing autonomous driving customers actually. We're gonna announce some soon. And yeah, very excited to also build products on our data because data is good, but once you give it to another person, it loses a little bit of its defensibility. So the strategy is to build more products on top of the data, and then we don't have to give the data itself. We only give the insight or the product that is using the data, and we have defensibility, and we can also make much more revenue. So these are kind of the things that we are working on in parallel. Closing more customers and productizing our data.
Alireza, it was fantastic to have you on the podcast. One very, very final question I like to ask all my guests before wrapping up is, what is your favorite use case of DePIN outside of what you guys are immediately doing?
I'm very bullish on physical AI, as I mentioned, so robotics as well. And I think generally its NATIX is under the same umbrella as well, data curation network. So if you're collecting real world data for autonomous driving, for embodied AI, humanoids essentially, it's a killer use case. So I've seen a couple of projects starting to do this, but I think that's what excites me these days the most. Around physical AI, and it's called Deep AI or DeepI, whatever.
Yeah, we did a Twitter space on
it might be
DeepI. Yeah.
So I think that is a very killer use case for me, especially when it comes to data curation networks.
Good answer. And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's probably the part of AI that's maybe underserved the most, but it's the one that it's growing so fast currently, because once you go past LLMs, then you get into physical AIs, and and then I think the step after that is these AIs being able to communicate to one another. But yeah, different discussion entirely. But Alireza, so much fun to have you on the podcast. I've personally learned a lot. We've definitely gone over, but I didn't want to stop because I think this is such a quality episode. So thank you so much for coming on again. How can people stay in touch with you and NATIX going forward?
So easiest is to follow me on Twitter, or NATIX as well on Twitter, NATIX Network. That's the handle for NATIX. And for me, it's Alireza Ghods, number 2. So yeah, happy to stay in touch, and yeah, we usually announce the biggest things over there.
Fantastic. Alireza, thank you so much for coming on again, and I'll catch you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sina. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion, brought to you by the embedded blockchain Minima, the only layer 1 blockchain lean and compact enough to run a full node on chip or on any mobile IoT device. If you're new to DePIN, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter to stay up to date. Thank you so much for watching again, and we'll catch you in the next episode.